so that everybody knows, your name is Edward Grant.
Right.
You lived in Sabattus for quite a while.
Yes.
And how old are you now, Ed?
88.
You're 88.
Yeah, I'll be 89 in August.
So you went into service in 1955.
Yes.
Yeah, just after the Korean War. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And that's the reason I went in, because it used to be they would take everyone down to Portland, to Camp Williams, and they'd give you a pre-induction physical. And when I went down, there was about 40 of us that took that pre-induction physical at Portland. And they told us, don't plan anything more than 6 months because you're going to be going to Korea. And I said to myself, I don't want to go over there and be in a foxhole where I can be on a ship. At least I'll have a nice clean bed to sleep on every night. So that's why I went in the Coast Guard. And I got thinking, and you know, I didn't have to worry about it because they ended the Korean War.
Right, yeah. You just missed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I went into the Coast Guard, because I didn't want to be in a foxhole.
Well, being over in a foxhole in Korea, you're much better off in a bunk bed on a boat.
At least you have
I
a clean bed every night.
Yeah, exactly.
And no one's going to sneak up on you when you're in the foxhole.
I don't know, you were telling me that you did a lot of genealogy, so this may be an easier question for you. How far back did the Grants go in Sabattus? Or even in the Wales-Lisbon area, you know?
This is it. And this is proof.
Yeah.
You know anything doing
No, I understand. Yeah.
Well, anyway, Peter Grant, I can't tell you who he fought for, but it was Scots and someone else. Well, they lost. And they had all these young guys that were in their 20s, and they knew there was going to be troublemakers. So they couldn't figure what they wanted to do with them. So what happened, a ship's captain said, I'll transport them to the new country. And to do that, the sea captain, they put them in bondage, which had taken them about 8 years to pay off when they got there.
Could I ask you, I'm not sure if you know this, but I kind of think maybe you do. When they finally got off the boat, where exactly were they, do you know? Where did they land?
I can give it to you roughly.
Right.
And it was in the area of Kittery.
Okay, yeah, they came in there. Yeah.
And I can't remember the name.
Right in between Kittery and Portsmouth.
Now, I can't remember that river.
Piscatacus?
Yeah.
And
I think you're right, Jay.
And this Peter Grant, I believe, it was up on that river somewhere that he was held to bondage, and it was a sawmill. Well, anyway, he was supposed to have 8 years to work off his payment for coming to the New World, and well, anyway, something happened to the place, and the guy sold out, and when he did, it ended.
Oh, the bondage ended, huh?
Yeah.
Good.
So he was only in bondage, I think it was less than 4 years.
Okay.
It should have been 8, because either the sawmill operator passed or closed his business.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting, yeah. Wow.
Actually, being in Sabattus, my father was the first one.
Yeah.
Because he was brought up, like I said, at Stockton Springs there,
right.
Penobscot.
Right. Wow, that is very interesting,
And,
though, yeah. Wow.
He was 19 years old. And back then everything was sail. Well, he died in 73, I think it was. He was 96 years old, so you
Yeah.
figure up when he was
Yeah.
born.
Yeah, I knew that they were, that's when I knew, you know, like I said, going up there with Cassie Jolson, they were not taking care of themselves, that, you know, so she'd bring them like a pot of beef stew or, you know, things like that, you
Yeah.
know.
And now her husband, as far as I know, that man never had a driver's license.
He never did. No, he did not.
And he worked in one of the mills, I don't know which one it was, in Lewiston, I think.
He worked at the Cowan Mill.
And he went back and forth on the Hudson bus.
Yep. Yeah,
all
exactly.
that time.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, he did. And
And-
then he, yeah,
And the last time I see him, Cassie had already passed, and I was going down the hill there on High Street, and he was out there, and he was walking with a cane, and to me, you know, he was much older than me,
oh, yeah,
and the last time I see him, I stopped and said hi to him. He knew who I was, and
Yeah.
his mind was still good.
yeah. Where did you go to school, Ed?
Sabattus High School.
Yeah, but when you very first started,
No,
primary,
it was up on Green Street.
you went to the Green Street School, okay? Yeah,
Yep, it was just primary and first grade.
Yep.
Because all the rest was at the high school. I think from the second grade up was at high school.
was it right through being a senior in high school?
Right,
From
same
being,
building.
From being in the second grade, yeah, you
Yeah.
just went to the high school. Yeah, because you was right in that,
And
right in that
That's
turnover
what
time.
hurt the high school real bad was when they didn't carry subjects for kids that wanted to go to college. You probably ran into that.
Yeah,
Where they, whatever the difference, like if they wanted to go to Lewiston or Edward Lowe, they had to pay the difference on the tuition,
Yep.
which wasn't much. You ever hear any stories about the Devil Den on Sabattus Mountain?
Well, we've heard some. Jason's more up on that than I am.
Are ya?
Yeah,
The
Yeah.
legend is that the original Chief Sabattus, he wasn't actually a chief, he was just the head of the local tribe, which controlled the Sabattus River.
Yes.
Well, the legend is he was killed at the top of the lake, and they either buried him at the top of the lake, about where the chicken coops used to be, or once the rest of his tribe came,
Yeah.
they buried him in the Devil's Den,
Yeah.
and that gave it the name.
See, I never got that when I was doing genealogy.
Yeah.
Because there's not much ornaments you could find.
No,
'Cause for
there's
the
very
Indians,
little. There was a
they
Bates.
kept no records.
There was a
It
Bates
was just
College
about-
group that went
you
up
just-
there. There was a Bates College group that went up there, and they explored it back. It's not very big. It only goes back about 20 feet at the time, I should say. And they went in there. They said there wasn't much in there. So
Did you ever run across Frank Hall and any things?
what's that?
Frank Hall.
Oh, yeah.
Well, him and my father were pretty good friends. And he said that he could go up there and stand up and walk into, the cave up there.
I've heard that. That would have been a long time ago. 'Cause
Well, anyway.
it's kind of filled in with
Well, I went up there.
Not much air.
It would have been in the early 50s.
Yeah.
And you could just barely crawl. And it looks like the roof had collapsed and it came down. And the only space that was left was that little space between.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't get in nowhere. And that was just full of porcupines.
Oh yeah. Well, the legend was guys were hunting a black bear, and they got a shot on it, and it went inside the cave, and their hunting dog went in after it and never came out. And so they left, and as they were going down the mountain, they saw the dog on the other side of the mountain. So it must have.
Yeah,
There he is.
there
It must have
really
been
some
cavernous.
big stories about how
Yeah, oh,
far
yeah.
that cave went in.
Yeah.
Because if you come out on the other side, you'd be in Wales on the
Correct.
Pond Road.
Oh, Yeah.
And
It's
That's it.
it's an interesting mountain. It is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
And,
history.
but you can't separate the fiction from the real.
Sometimes you don't want to. Sometimes
Right.
the fiction's more
Like,
interesting.
I was so disappointed when I went up there because I thought we'd be able to walk right in.
Oh no, I think it's kind of.
And what happened, it looks like the way the roof was made, it caved in and came down about 4 feet. That's the only space there was. And it looked like it had come down from the ceiling because it matched up with the ceiling, this part that came down. But I was very disappointed
Yeah.
after hearing all these,
All the
you know,
stories.
especially when you're a young
Yeah.
person.
And it's like you say, you know, it's pretty hard to differentiate from what's the truth and, you know, and what's fiction, you know.
Right,
But
yes.
anyway, so,
Because like, I'd heard that same thing that went in on one side of the mountain,
Yeah.
came out on the other side,
Yeah.
over on the Pond Road side.
we talked a little bit about this before we ever actually started recording, but what was life like for you in Sabattus, let's say until you were 12 years old, when you were just a little guy running around,
Well,
you know?
I mean, I thought it was a great place, and I didn't like Lewiston. And for one thing, you get within 2 miles of Lewiston, stink. That river was so filthy with
No.
pollution.
Yeah,
And
exactly,
it-
yeah.
But the people that lived in Lewiston, I guess got used to it or something. But boy, when you came from Sabattus, you could be about 2 miles from Lewiston, and the smell was terrible.
Right, yeah.
And you know, I thought Sabattus was quite a place.
Yeah.
Of course, I spent quite a bit of time on Sabattus Lake fishing and stuff.
Yeah.
And anyway, you know, we get tired, and it brings back new things.
Well, just keep going, you know.
Well,
say
right-
whatever you want to say.
Well, I can't. If you go up Holden Street, I think it is. Anyway, you can go right down to the pond. Well, they used to cut ice there. And I was probably about 8 years old. And the old ice house, some of it was still there. It hadn't all fell down.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they did it, but see, they had a ramp where they'd take that ice out of the lake. And them cakes would be heavy. And they had like a conveyor belt that went up. But after the conveyor belt got up there, I have no idea how they lowered
Yeah.
the ice down into the ice house. So anyway, this was probably, I would say, 8 years after they'd stopped cutting ice. And all the sawdust was still in there. Was kids, we dug down there almost 5 feet, and we actually hit ice. Believe it or not,
Yeah.
covered up in that sawdust. It was like that ice had been in there about 8 years.
Yeah.
Well, all the ice boxes were made a certain size, and it would probably be like 10 by 10. Well, anyway, the Iceman, he had a set of tongs, and he'd hook it into, and it was cut specifically so it just fit into an ice box. And I don't know what the dimensions, but it was probably like 10 by 10. And he'd have a big burlap bag. He'd have it folded about 4 or 5 times. And of course, you know, that stuff melts pretty fast in July. And he'd throw it up on his shoulder. And that burlap bag would be folded like 5 or 6 times so he wouldn't get too wet.
Yeah.
And hit them tongs, so that's how it carried the ice in, dropped it into the ice chest. And that was, we was just lucky. We had electricity, so
Yeah.
we didn't need an ice box.
Yeah. Yeah. Quite a few of the people in in Sabattus remember the old ice boxes, you know, and the
Yes.
ice fan would go around, and you just, one gentleman who we've spoken with said that they used to put a little card in the window that they wanted ice, and on the card you could say how big a piece you'd take, you know,
Yeah, because
and they would cut it just whatever you requested, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what, well, this gentleman, you may
'Cause,
know him as Johnny Coburn, but yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah, Johnny was telling us that, yeah.
and he I known Johnny. Well, since he was probably 12 years old.
Yeah.
Because he's a little bit older than me.
I mentioned this to you before we were talking. You had some interesting stuff, and you was also mentioning the Memorial Day Parade,
Yes.
because I know that was always a big deal in my life, living in Sabattus, and you were telling me it was in yours too. Would you like to go over that again right now for the people that are going to be seeing this?
Well, what I did up until I was about 10 or 12, all the kids in the town of Sabattus could walk at the tail end of the parade. And like I said before, I think it was early. And of course, back in the, this was early, well, right after the Second World War.
Right. Yeah.
And he'd pass all these flags out, little ones about that big. And then he'd collect them afterwards. And but I can remember marching in it every year, right up until I was around old enough to be a Boy Scout.
Right. Right.
And I went into the Boy Scouts, and Zeke Thompson was Scout leader.
Yeah.
And did you know Greenleaf up on?
Yeah, I did know Mr. Greenleaf. Yes.
Yeah, he was in the construction business.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
He was big in the Legion.
and did you ever hear about the Sloats? He was a minister.
He was the pastor. Yes.
at the Methodist
Pearly
Church.
Sloat. Pearly. I think his first name was Pearly Sloat.
I'm not sure if it was or not.
Yeah. He
And-
took over. You're the one talking. I don't want, but I'll just maybe I can jog your memory. He took over from Mr. Ricker. I don't know if you remember him or not.
Well, I knew his. Well, this would have been. I don't know how he fit into it, but I came up from Florida, and I didn't even know it. But they had. It was the last year of Sabattus High School, and they had a reunion.
Yeah.
And I went to it, and I met some people I hadn't met for over 60 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
And I don't know if she's still.
A question I was thinking about before I came here is the names of the people that used to live on High Street. For instance, at the very beginning of High Street there, let's start at the Mishues, and then there was the Grants, right?
Right.
Then who lived in Armin Cody's house when you were living there before Armin?
No, it was vacant, and
It was
he just came there summers and just for a couple of weeks, and he was superintendent of schools out of state, but originally he came from Maine, but
okay.
that just come summers.
Okay, I'm quite sure I know who that family was. Okay, I believe their names were Sweeney.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bring back some other memories. Now this Mitchell house,
Yeah.
where the Mitchells lived. I really can't remember their names, but anyway, he was a pharmacist, And the store right on the corner where Christmas was, that was a pharmacy. And I was I was just barely remember.
Yeah.
Well, they had a soda fountain in there.
Yeah.
You know, all drugstores had a soda fountain.
Right.
And I can remember you go in there, ice cream, a dip of ice cream, 5 cents.
Yeah. Just to refresh your memory, I believe the pharmacist's last name was Coombs.
Yes, and he lived in where the Mishers used to live.
Okay, you're answering a lot of questions for me
That
from
was
something
his,
else I'm
yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, okay. And then, who lived in the little place just down below the
Where
Sweeney
Cody
lived? Yeah, or whatever.
Wheeler.
That was the Wheelers?
Her husband worked at Roden Hills as a meat cutter. He was a very good meat cutter, and he got involved a lot. I'm not sure he served on the selectmen, but he was in a lot of the town
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, then I know that, then if you keep going down the hill, Tom Phelan lived in the next house.
Right?
And then my great uncle Lloyd Scott,
Yeah.
with my great grandmother Emma lived there.
Yeah.
So and I know the most of them. Then you keep
But-
going down and
But if
yeah,
you go up the other way, like if you up towards Route 9,
right,
the Greens lived up there.
right.
And actually, I think she married some doctor.
The girl did, yes.
Yes.
Yes, she did. And Florence, her mother, married my great uncle George Scott, and her name, the name of the girl was Doris Green.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he practiced, I think, in Lyston or something.
No, she was married to a doctor. He practiced for a long time. I'm trying to think of his name, and it'll probably shoot
I can't either.
It'll probably shoot in my head here before we're done. So
Now, I can remember Dr. Wyman. Well, he lived in that house there between where the two streets come together.
right in back of the right in back of the monument.
Right.
Yep.
No, I knew Johnny Gobin though
Yeah.
for many a year.
Everybody in Sabattus, I think,
Yes.
knew Johnny Coben. That does know Johnny Coben. He's a good guy though. Johnny's a good guy.
Frank Spencer.
Yeah. He died in fire.
My best friend was Norm Spencer,
Norman. Yeah.
and he most of his career was being a police officer.
Yeah, that's right.
And he was up, I forgot what town it was. And he went out on a domestic. He told me this himself. He said, them bullets were flying all over Sputnik.
Yeah.
What? He was up halfway in the bedroom, and Spencer was on the first couple of steps. He shot all these shots and just split the railings and stuff. They're just splitting. He thought he was going to die right there.
Yeah.
And he did get badly wounded, though.
Yeah, he did.
And
I'm not sure exactly where that was, but I
Wilton.
almost want to say Winthrop.
Wilton.
I want to say it was in Winthrop, but I'm not
No,
sure.
Wilton.
Wilton? Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
because I went up and see him about 2 years before he died. And me and Norman were, after he got shot there, he was never quite right.
No.
And he was so bitter about it. Can you imagine this? Shooting a police officer and wounding him. That guy only served 4 years
That's unbelievable, isn't
Yep.
it?
for shooting a police officer.
Yeah.
It would have been his older brother. And he was in the Second World War. And he was in the Air Corps. Well, I don't know how he did it, but he says, I'll be coming over Sabattus. And I guess they were getting ready to go to Europe or something. Well, anyway, You know how they tip the plane to wave the wings?
Yeah.
Well, I think it was a 2-engine job. Well, anyway, he zoomed right over their house there on the river.
Yeah.
And they got a big charge out of that. And I think he was on his way to, this was Second World War.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he was on his way to England.
Yeah. I think almost all those Spencer boys were in the Second World War.
Yeah, I can't remember. Because the only ones I really knew was, of course, Norman was the youngest.
Yeah.
And Ken.
Yep.
And he was quite a stock car driver.
Yes, he was. Yes.
Yep. He ran up at Bangor. And I guess one year he won the championship up there.
Yeah, he did. Oxford 250 once also.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
He won the 250?
Yeah, way back when it was in its infancy, but yeah. Yeah.
I know Mike Rowe did.
Yeah. I think the one, getting back to the Spencers, I think the one that was in the Air Force that did the overfly was Bob.
Yeah, I don't remember the older boys. 'Cause,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think
they
that's-
were so much older than
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Well, like, we're older than the served in the Second World
Yeah,
War.
yeah. You touched on this a little bit before we actually turned on the cameras, but the last time you were in Sabattus, what did you have a general impression of how it looked now as compared to
Yes.
when you were living there?
I just could not believe. See, when I went to school there in the 50s, the population was about 1,200. And it's up around 4,000 now, isn't it?
Well, it's almost 6.
6?
Last I heard, it was like 5,800, I believe.
Yeah. But the biggest thing was how the downtown area fell apart. Everyone moved out to the outskirts.
Yeah.
He was road commissioner, so he had a lot of the machinery, you know, so he could do the work as the big stuff.
Just so the people that are hearing this understand, when you say he had a lot of machinery, it wasn't the town's machinery, it was his own machinery.
Right.
Because the road commissioner then had to supply.
Yeah,
everything,
everything,
you know.
everyone wanted to be road commissioner because you could make some pretty good money renting your stuff to the town.
Exactly, yeah. That's where you made your money, right?
Yep.
Yep.
And like, but one thing they wouldn't do it like the snow contracts. Well, they figured they wouldn't do more than 3 years. Well, they'd figure, you know, hardly any snow, boy, that'd make out. But if they had 2 heavy snowstorms,
Yeah.
and that's why they did it on, I think, on a 3-year basis.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a
Now,
gamble, but you know.
right.
I noticed that the way it was when people ran for road commissioner, whoever won, generally the other guys that ran against him, he would hire them to help him do his work, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They'd subcontract around,
Yeah.
so sometimes it didn't matter much which
And-
guy won, you know? Everybody stayed busy.
Yeah.
Because he needs their equipment,
And
you
of
know?
course, Lester Dobbins lived almost across from us.
Yep.
And he was the only police officer full-time in
Right.
Sabattus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was Wilbur and Lambert. And Lambert was connected to the sheriff's department somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Lambert was just a constable, I guess.
Yeah.
Wilbur.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Wilbur
Ray
was just a
Wilbur.
con. Yeah, but like you say, Edgar Lambert was a deputy sheriff. Quite a bit of stuff. Have you seen any of our oral histories that we've done? Other people that we've talked to, much like we're talking to you?
Not too much.
No. I'll.
But what impressed me was horse and buggies on High Street and Main Street.
You like those, huh?
Well, it's got to go back to what?
Yeah.
Around 1900 or before.
Well, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, yeah, it would be.
It was probably before the automobiles had been invented.
Right, yeah. Because even even right about that time, like I think you got down to about the early 1930s is when they stopped the trolley altogether.
Well,
So,
I got a little story to tell you.
yeah, I figure when I said trolley, you might.
Yes, I rode the last trolley that ever left Sabattus, and Hudson Bus Line was going to take over. And when I came back to Sabattus, I came back on the Hudson Bus,
Oh, that's
Yeah.
pretty neat.
and that was, I don't think I was even around 7 or 8 years old. They never took up them rails for the electric car, and of course the electric car went out by Sturtevant's store, right?
Yep.
You know, between there and the Klondike. You ever do any history on the woolen mill?
It's one of the things I'll bring up with you. You just mentioned the Klondike. The Klondike it wasn't what it was called really, but that was a nickname it was given.
Yeah.
And the reason they called it the Klondike is it never had any heat.
Okay, I never knew that.
Yeah, so they called it the Klondike. It got the nickname the Klondike.
Yeah, that's all I knew. Was
Yeah,
the Klondike.
exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
But no, that's why they
Yep.
did, because, and if you see any pictures of it or anything, you'll notice there's no stacks or anything around it. Even the oldest pictures, now that you know it, you'll look and you'll notice there's no chimneys or anything around the Klondike.
And Parks, they owned the woolen mill there.
On Main Street.
Yes.
And all that stuff, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, you've given us a lot of great information. I don't know if you have any other things you want to say, but
Any
if you
stories
don't,
of-
I think go ahead, Jay.
Any stories of Martin's Point at all, or anything like that?
Well, just going swimming up there,
Yeah.
because, you had to pay to go to Long Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy. But you know what we used to do? You know where this would have been the train track,
Mm-hmm.
went over across, well, we'd walk down the train track, we'd go right onto Long Beach,
Yeah.
and everyone else had
Walk
to,
up.
it came through on the road, they had to pay to get in.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, just about everyone's about swim up Martin's Point, so.
Now, Mike says he remembers a stone wall out in the lake. That they used to be able to stand on the stone wall if they were swimming out there. Do you have any recollection of anything like that? Or?
No, I don't, but I've heard stories. I can't remember his name, but it might have been Malcolm Bueller. Well, anyway, at that time, he was the oldest man in the town. He was 90-something. And he was the oldest man in Sabattus. And I can remember him saying, see, of course, they raised that lake about 10 feet when they built the dam. But before that, down by Long Beach here, I heard stories that was cow pasture.
Yeah.
Because it raised the lake 10 feet. I mean, most of the lake is
Very shallow.
less than around 20 feet.
Yeah.
Except, I think the deepest one is up to Mars Point, and I think that's about 40 feet. Because I know they tried to put salmon in, and trout too shallow.
Well, Ed, we really appreciate you
Well,
talking to us.
you know what'll happen after you leave? I'll remember a lot of
Oh,
stuff.
no, we understand that. It happens with everybody.
Yeah.
It happens with us, But we really appreciate all you've given us.
Well, thank you.
It's really neat. And
Yeah.
right from the very beginning, I found that really intriguing about how the grants came to America. That was quite a story. I enjoy hearing things like that,
Yep. And, well, this is my son right behind you, Gene. And, of course, he was born in Maine, but my grandson, he was the first grant to be born outside of the state of Maine.
Well, again, thank you very much.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Yep.